Hey, everybody. I'm about to have an interview with Bronwyn Barry, a show friend of mine doing a lot of passive house stuff, so stay tuned. So I was trying to catch up and read your bios and stuff and see what you're up to these days. Sounds like you're very still much active in passive house, which is great. Hopefully that continues on. How much traction is out there for that these days?
California still really, really disappointingly slow. Everywhere else, I'm actually just I've been writing over the last 2 years, doing a whole research into policy that's scaling high performance building to really identify which policies are actually working. Because we did a survey across the whole of North America. There's lots of sort of passive house friendly policy or policies that mention passive house or chuck it in the same bucket with a whole bunch of other things and, give it a mention. But really what I realized is, not all of them actually really stimulate implementation. It's very similar to net zero. It's any high performance sort of methodology, and whether you call it passive house or net zero or some other version of it that is not baseline code. Really what we need to do is get much better at stimulating the implementation side. Because that's where the rubber hits the road, right? All the grand ambitions and goals that we've set, even here in California, when you look at like what's actually happening on the ground, with decarbonization, and then you get to really where the product has to be installed in situ. It's a big mess, right? There's insane backups. There's challenges with, whether the system is big enough, whether the product actually fits the opening, all the other complexities that happen, in the real world, right? Like where the builder actually has to install a product. And that's always, for me, been the point of most interest for me as an architect that kind of came up through the construction side of design. I've always been, I never graduated through architecture school, just by function of I was an immigrant trying to do a degree at a university and paying foreign student fees that I just couldn't afford as a sort of a young person here. So I kind of back-rooted my way into architecture by really doing internships in the field and actually doing real practical applications. So, my work running the women's construction crew for Habitat for Humanity.
That's so cool.
Yeah, that was really seminal for me because it gave me a real perspective on, you could do a nice drawing, but if the person who actually has to put the building together can't reach a place without, there's not enough room between buildings to swing a hammer. And, if junctions can't be sealed, or you'll like this one, ducts cannot be installed in there's just not enough space. There might be enough space for the duct, but the human being that actually has to put the duct in that place can't get there.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, we're always looking for new routes for ductwork just for that, the structural frame is in the way or no one thought about it or
just
secondary.
Exactly. Those just very simple, pragmatic approaches to how we build and how, really, upstream as the designer. That's one trade. Essentially, we're a trade. Architects are a trade, even though I think architects don't like to think about themselves as tradespeople.
Right.
We have a serious responsibility to make sure that everything that we design can actually be built. And I think that's always for me been the where I've really focused my own career and been the most passionate about. And it's translated into now, how do we work to get policies in place? Because I sort of went upstream from my own work after being, immensely frustrated that our codes and our approaches to building just don't really function practically and translate to really practical strategies for implementation. And that's sort of where I'm really, policy now, finding the policies that actually scale real implementation is what I'm laser focused on. And it's been fascinating to see which policies are working, and what's the mechanism inside of them that makes them effective, because that's the second question. We've got to peel back that onion, and we often sort of get stuck on the surface, superficial, without kind of going down the next couple of layers to the really, where the meat really is where the juicy part of the
right.
challenge is solved. Right. So,
do you see a difference between the projects that are just the one-off custom build or the cottage builder versus the production builder? And I'm kind of on that side of the fence these days, and so a lot of them, when I walk onto or into a meeting when we're in design meeting, pre-construction of a development, the architect's there, but they're very agreeable to anything that happens on the table. It's kind of the opposite of what you just described, which I think is more valuable, which is, hey, stand up and say, let's redesign this. But I don't know if that fits in that world. And I was just wondering if you had a experience either side of that.
Well, I mean, as you mentioned, I'm sort of really still been very much in the passive house world and focused on that because early on in my career, I looked for a whole bunch of different solutions. And that was the one that fit with what I was trying to do. It kind of gave me, as an architect, a framework with very clear targets, which I liked. So it was like, okay, this is very cut and dry. It gave me the training to learn how to do it. And it gave me the tools to actually implement it and check my designs. Once you run it through the energy model, it's very clear, does it work or doesn't it? So as a practical person, it really provided the structure that I appreciated. And, we built a bunch of projects, and I worked with a builder very closely for 10 years. I worked with Alan Gilliland at One Sky Homes, and we structured ourselves as a design build company. And our mission was just to deliver buildings that actually performed as designed. So we
not just designed beautifully, but had some performance criteria under the hood.
All of that, and design function, has so many layers. It's just, it's not just does the kitchen, can you reach the fridge, and not walk too far away to the sink, 10 steps. And does the bedroom and the bathroom function in the living room? Those are very practical things. But as you say, the performance part was always, architects never really feel like they're responsible for that. And yet the deep irony is we have massive control on that outcome. And making that connection was really exciting for me because it really said, oh, wow, I can really control how comfortable my clients are, and how efficiently the house performs. And that really, to me, was kind of why I'm still really a big fangirl of Passive House. It's like, after 10 years, we monitored all our projects, and lo and behold, they all actually perform exactly how we modeled them. And it was kind of like, oh, duh. It's like if you've got something that works and, every time a coconut, it's kind of like, wow, why wouldn't you keep doing it?
Right, exactly. So it was using the PHPP, the package that would allow you to more correctly diagnose or analyze the performance versus the other tools that are out there that everybody else uses.
Well, honestly, I never see architects even using energy models. They farm it out to a consultant to tell them what they need to do, but they don't actually ever drive the engine. They don't drive that model themselves. And I think that disconnect, again, sort of like detaches them from the agency that they actually have to actually fix, make a building work. And but I want to go back to your question about production builders versus custom builders, because I think it's really important. And it's an opportunity that I think really we still aren't seeing custom production builders really doing anything close to passive house. And I think I was up in Sacramento a couple of weekends ago, and there's huge subdivisions going out in the northwest part, the Roseville area, massive new single family and sort of nicer subdivisions. Our fabulous, amazing farmland in California is getting paved over. I love doing this. I'm sure you do too. You go and see the homes that are being framed up, and walk around, and you could see the the infrastructure is built out. And I was kind of astounded that these, even just the framing, is so bad, and they could save so much money by just doing it not even that much, just a little bit better. So I was like, wow, they're leaving huge opportunities on the table that will have massive impacts on the occupants, for the next, however, those buildings are going to be there for the next at least 80 to, maybe 100 years.
Yeah, it drives me crazy. But it's like, it's such a disconnected, fragmented industry. There's no captain at the helm. It's multiple heads, and it's, you talk to the construction manager, he has high aspirations when it gets down to the reality, and the superintendents are saying, yeah, but I have a schedule to meet and blah, blah, blah.
But all of those problems are upstream design problems that, if they were fixed at the design stage, would make all of those other downstream, the foreman and the sub-trades, that's just a shift upstream in how the building was designed, how it's, like the structural engineering, and then even just the details of how, on the windows. That's another whole, that I'm looking at these just absolutely dreadful windows that I can get really high performance triple pane windows made in the USA that cost minimally more than like your bog standard Home Depot vinyl. And again, it's this massively missed opportunity that
right.
But again, production builders don't see the value in doing anything different because they can't sell the product for any more if they did it better or worse.
Right. The thing that we try to remind them is that's fine and dandy, but now go look at the money you spend in the complaint department and the uncomfortable, you could get rid of that whole department if you had done the front end correctly.
Yes. No, and I mean, as you say, in some ways they can't sell it for more because they, the way our real estate sales structure works, the homeowner doesn't know the difference between the house that looks good and the other house that looks good because they can't see what's inside the walls.
Right.
And we don't
Is there
have
any movement in that direction? Because we were really pushing to get that on the MLS, but we would get shot down left and right.
I hear that all the time. There's certain cities. The city of Berkeley has a point of sale disclosure where you have to disclose the energy bills. I don't know how much traction that's actually getting, but the good thing is one of the new CEC commissioners he works in the Energy Commission, Will Vincent. He is making it his personal mission to get that on the radar and get it actually daylit so that we can differentiate between a great performing building and just a bog standard like baseline dog.
Right. Exactly. Because, I equate it to like back in the day when we were buying cars on the lot before the sticker got on the window. They look the same. They both have four wheels and they're shiny. So they must be equally performing. So, it'll get there. I was just wondering what the traction was.
No, I mean, I honestly, I've sort of shifted away from trying to intervene in baseline code because I've found it to be completely, don't want to be too derogatory, just not worth my time. Because you're fighting an uphill battle against massively entrenched entities who don't want to do anything better. They want to do the least amount that they possibly and legally can. And that's not the sandbox I like to play in. And it's sort of working with people who are not motivated to do better. So policy-wise, what I've finally figured out, and it also took me a while, and full disclosure.
Yeah, who to hang with and who to avoid. Yeah.
Yeah, and also to focus, and this has been part of this policy analysis, is figure out what are the policies that are actually working and why. And we've seen the programs that are fantastically effective are the top-end incentive programs like NYSERDA's Buildings of Excellence program, where it's giving serious incentive for the people who actually are interested in doing better. It's supporting them by helping them with upfront sort of modeling and analysis, which is, does take more time. And then it's supporting them by giving them actual real money in the front project, in the first pilot projects, to supplement the sort of small upcharge that the developer will have to pay to do a better building. And, the front end of that program was also training. NYSERDA gave a 50% off subsidy for anybody who wanted to sign up and take what classes like the Certified Passive House Consultant Designer class. And when the utility or the efficiency entity in a state says, we'll give you 50% off to do this training, people actually go, oh, they want us to do that and they're helping us. And so they signed up. So, New York State has the largest number of qualified professionals who know how to do passive house in the whole of North America.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
And, this has been part of this policy analysis I've done. We've looked at, okay, where are the actual qualified professionals who know what a high performance building actually looks like, who have the training for how to do, just those simple like air sealing details, thermal bridge free details, and ventilation system design.
Huh. Wow, that's so cool. And because they've always kind of been the leader anyway, the Northeast, and NYSERDA specifically is, weatherization, and even the blower door development, all that way back in the day was from up there. So, wow, that's so cool. And once they're in the classroom, you have them hooked, right? You got their attention. They have to hear the messaging and.
Yeah, and I mean, it's still voluntary, right? Like it's for people who already are predisposed to do better. you're supporting them, right? You're saying, okay, good. We want more people who want to do better. And, honestly, that's the magic. That's the three magic ingredients are support the people who want to do better. Give them all the additional. And then what happens, what we're seeing, the number of projects, high performance projects in that state is just going exponentially through the roof. And then what that does is it makes products available, much more high performance products that everybody has access to, whether you're going to do a high performance building or a baseline code building. And it also makes the bottom end of the market have to go, oh shit, like these guys are doing this, this, and this. I better, buck up and figure this stuff out, or I'm being left behind.
That's a very cool model. Teach them, train them, provide them what they need all at once, and then there's no reservation of taking the next step.
Exactly, and we have this sort of mentality where we want to keep focusing on the bottom end, and we put enormous amount of money into code compliance, getting more people to just comply with the worst possible building standard. And honestly, I've written in California for 10 years. My projects have been penalized by the code structure. And I'm kind of
for being better, right?
We've just known, that wasn't.
I remember when NABI was trying to get his permitted, and they were giving him a bunch of crap, and he had to put in all that electric resistant heat. It's like, are you kidding me?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Again,
crazy.
We focus on the wrong end of the market. And then we penalize the people doing the stuff that we actually really need. And that's just so wrong. And so, but it's just how we've built our entire industry. And, that's really what I'm trying to shift and show people. Actually, we need to flip that. And so it's why I'm not, I don't bother with, code comments anymore, although I did try for 10 years to try and at least get more testing.
You get tired of pounding your head against the wall. It's like, enough. I'd rather hang out with cool people who want to make a difference. Yeah, I hear you.
So now I'm really focused more on how do we support the top end, and how do we get programs that replicate what NYSERDA has done. And we're getting some real traction. I mean, Mass Save is the next sort of real front runner. We've seen, the Pennsylvania low-income housing financing program for multifamily buildings. That's a massive winner. So really, I'm trying to really daylight the programs that work. And I'm trying to scale and get those implemented everywhere, including here in California, which is sort of a game.
So is that what what a great state to be in. Is that kind of where you want to play, or do you kind of see yourself pushing stuff outside of those states for other states that want to make movement?
So we're, I'm at my, I was one of the founders of Passive House California. You were in that group early on, one of the early, members and advocates for that. I've sort of transitioned out of that role. I served as the board president there for 10 years and then handed it off to a bunch of local board members. And I went on to help found the Passive House Network, the national Passive House entity, and I've been, was the board chair there for 10 years and have just transitioned to focus on policy. So I'm the policy lead. I chair the policy committee, and we're pushing this policy model across the country. We're making some good inroads. We've got some really awesome stuff happening in Colorado. There's a fire rebuild program there that just came through for the Marshall Fire that gives $37,500 to people who rebuild as a passive house. That's some real money. That's real money. Yeah. So we're working, across the country. I am still working here in California. We've got the Public Utility Commission just issued a report on policy that I helped really shape. It was written by some really fabulous consultants through Opinion Dynamics, focused on multifamily, because we think multifamily is really the key front runner model. But I mean, I'm shown from 10 years of data with my projects with Alan is we can build passive house for equal or less than code compliant single family. And
that's the message that we have to put out there, is that's the unknown to them, and that's why they don't want to look in that box, because they don't know what the cost is. It's a design
solution, and getting
right
design, the upfront, it's the whole magic with anything transformative is if you have to go upstream, and you have to look at like the easy win, the big moves. And we in our whole code structure, it's the low hanging fruit got picked a long time ago, right? And now it's the hard stuff, and people, but the hard stuff doesn't have to be that hard if you start with a better baseline building, right? Like, you're not trying to do 20 gables on a thing with 5 dormers on each direction and all this junky nonsense.
That would be my fear, is they would just want to take their old plan X and just slap a new design on it and throw it out the door and call it passive.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's always what people want to do. And that's, that way, is just, that's a road paved with disaster. And
right.
It's definitely not going to be cost effective.
Right. When I was talking to Graham, he was pretty convinced that it had to be done factory built versus site built. Are you in that same, or do you think it just depends on where you're standing?
I've just done my first prefab panelized project with collaborating. It's a project I'm doing in Colorado Springs. So I've been working all around the state and also in Colorado. I'm licensed in Colorado as well. I really like the prefab factory. I've been an advocate of that for 10 years, and was trying to form prefab panels back in the day. For custom, it's very difficult because each project is a one-off. But for production,
it's got to be kind of a factory setting where you just print out 30 of those walls or whatever.
Yeah, for production build, it's totally a no-brainer. And again, if you're doing the same cookie cutter house on 20 of the lots in your subdivision, if you're not doing a factory build, you're just losing a massive opportunity to really, do things in a very cost-effective, systematic way. But again, it requires a lot more upfront coordination. And architects and, engineers, I was kind of surprised about how much more, it was a lot more work for me as the architect and for the structural engineer to really dial in the panel details, because it's, you can't just say, well, here's the, here are the hold downs and here are the connections, these are the beams. And then you give it to the contractor to figure it out in the field, right? I mean, and the contractor ends up on site. Oftentimes, he'll be like, oh, okay, well, I've got a hole down here, but, the window is there and I've got all the additional, the king and the jack and the cripple to, I can't get my hole down right where it is on the structural engineer plan. So he's forced to do a lot of that integration on site. And for prefab, you can't do that. You have to have everything completely integrated and planned upstream because it's got to be built right in the factory. And there's, you can't fudge it. When that panel gets to the job site, it's got to be nailed right onto the right spot.
Right. So, maybe that's not the right model for the production builder.
Well, actually, it could be, and it should be. You can do simplified prefab where you only do the framing. I know, there's a guy in California, Jerry McCaffrey, is doing his Integra prefab framing, and he's doing great. I think that's sort of scaling pretty well. When you get to passive house level, the level of, I think passive house community actually is really driving prefab because we get the benefit of having your insulation and your air sealing and your weather barrier all integrated and oftentimes your windows and sometimes even your exterior sheathing can be all added in the factory because we get the quality control is better in the factory than on the site. And I think, we are already predisposed to doing a lot more of the design up front. We've already if you're trying to do passive house and you don't already have all your HVAC stuff laid out, all your structural integrated because you got to look at where your connections are, where your thermal bridges are. So you've already, done most of that stuff upstream, and it's really just a function of coordinating your panel construction and your structural engineering design with the panel manufacturer. So,
right. So a lot of front end coordination, collaboration, sitting around the table, and which is right. This is my concern: is that production builders don't really have that except for their own in-house crew, and then they'll occasionally go, "Hey, call the structural engineer, get him in here to check this one thing." And there's this disconnect between what you're describing, which is a much more valuable team, figure it all out on the front end, then it's just pumping them out after you've perfected it.
Well, I'm amazed that production builders aren't really pushing this because it does all those field issues that inevitably occur are just taken away. In the speed of the construction, 3 days to put the whole thing up and like dry it in, done. So you're just transferring. And I have to say, for prefabrication, there's the sales pitch that gets used is it's much faster to build, and I would push back on that a little and say it's faster in the field. That time that gets saved in the field, it actually needs to be done in the planning stage. So you're just shifting the time, the construction time upstream to.
So design length might get longer, but production length gets shorter.
Exactly. And,
and maybe the design length would get shorter too over time as much as they perfected it, just gets shorter. And that's where their profits would skyrocket.
Exactly. And particularly for production buildings where you're doing the same design, you're kind of repeating. It's rinse and repeat.
I know.
So,
right.
I think, I'm finding that my details are shifting and changing to suit, and as I do more of these prefab projects, my skill level in designing specifically to that and then making my drawings fit that right from the get-go rather than having to, rejigger them, then, it's like any new system. There's a learning curve, but once you figure it out.
Right. And I was talking to Graham about that a little bit, and he was saying that now I don't know what he did to the spreadsheet, but now you can basically plug in a climate zone and it'll tell you kind of the best suite package and maybe some alternatives. And it's like, and that's what the production side, I'm not talking about our frontier people that actually go out there and do the stuff that needs to be done, but On the production side, they don't want to know. They just give me the recipe. Tell me what to do. We'll provide them in our energy modeling 5 scenarios, and then they tell us which one they're going to go with because they've got a better price on an air conditioner or a better price on their insulation or whatever. So that kind of shifts.
Yeah,
oh, now I went from column A to column C.
Yeah, I mean, like the HVAC system is like, duh. I mean, honestly, that's like if that's not your barrier, I can tell you that. If you,
right,
and that's the thing that's so interesting about, again, design solutions. Your design is like 70% of your HVAC, your building. I can do, and I just did a whole, I've shifted and trying to do some affordable multifamily buildings. I did a prefab concept design that I actually won the Architecture at Zero award for. I'll kind of do a little humble brag for myself here. But exactly that. It's prefabricated wall, straw insulated wall panel system. And, basically a very simple design that can be a 4-plex or a 6-plex. It's exactly the same footprint, but it's got lots of internal flexibility in how you lay it out internally. And then you cut and paste it on a site. So an entire neighborhood subdivision, same design. And really what I found is I designed it for Visalia in Central California. But that wall assembly, it was very simple. It was thicker than it needed to be by code, but it was sort of the basic panel that made production sense for this building type. Wood. It's a wood box filled with straw, and it was it's about 10 inches thick and then you add cladding. Yeah, and it wasn't any cheaper to make it skinnier. But it sort of worked for a bunch of different climate zones. But when I put it in Colorado, I could actually get exactly the same heating and cooling demand. So my HVAC system stayed exactly the same, but I changed the wall assembly. So again, architectural solutions, and then the HVAC stuff was just like, for Colorado climate and California climate, my heating load and my cooling loads flipped slightly, but they were still super low. And my HVAC equipment was still like, I could use the same HVAC.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Leave the HVAC load kind of where it is, but move your values elsewhere.
Yeah.
Higher insulation, better roof, better tightness, whatever that is, and keep the mechanical the same box, whatever your box preference is, because they're all going to heat pump, but they're all just being steered by code.
Exactly. No, I mean,
that's an interesting concept.
So your architecture, your envelope is your HVAC system. It just does the heavy lift first. And then you put the little bit of heating and the little bit of cooling.
Right.
That's what your mechanical system delivers.
So what's your go-to these days? HRV, ERV, and how are you cooling?
I for many years now, Alan and I have used here in the Bay Area. Honestly, HRV. We haven't needed an ERV in this particular climate. With an integrated heat pump delivering the heating and the cooling through the ventilation system. So the classic passive house formula that everybody else got scared of and said, oh, no, that's not, you can't get enough heating or enough cooling through the ventilation ductwork. You have to and what we figured out that, again, design solution, we made sure that the architecture actually made that HVAC design work. And it was a function of, if why that doesn't typically work is if you put your living spaces in like the northeast corner, which is cold, right? Those rooms will need more heating, and all the other rooms might not need as not enough. And so your ducting and then your delivery through the ventilation system gets to be, you can't really do that. So what we made sure that our room layout was actually workable for ventilation, heating, conditioning through the ventilation system. And as so we would put our bathrooms, which we would normally do a small point source heater in, which you want in a bathroom anyway. So a small electric mat, a heat mat underneath the floor at the vanity that was on a timer. Just boost the heat a little bit in that room. And it's an extract room anyway. So you're sucking air out of that. You're not delivering air, but you're delivering your heating through a different mechanism. And then the rest of the house was just easy. So, again, simplifying the mechanical system, but integrating it with how the architecture of the house is laid out.
That's interesting. So you're shifting around zones to better fit the machine, being able to push heating or cooling around the structure. That's cool.
It's house as a system. I mean, it's like what we all in the home performance industry have been talking about for years.
Yeah, that's kind of the next level for sure. But that's cool. Yeah, because when I was working with Bill and Graham way back then, we were trying to think, okay, what is the best box? And I always pitched that just build a box that's really nice, tight, whatever thickness you need to make it for that climate zone, and then put all your interior walls wherever you want them. But at least the box was easily built, quickly built, and then you could add all the ornamentation after it. Nowadays, they're just wrestling with, I still, again, am talking production, but flying beams out through the patio and trusses hanging out and all kinds of weird stuff that, they just don't get it. And they'll follow the model, they'll push a little bit, but at the same time, they're so dependent upon either their HVAC sub that won't guarantee it because you're not doing X, Y, Z, or the insulator misses stuff all the time and the raters don't catch it, multiple. And so I just try to figure out what is a better pitch for them. So I'm always looking for new stuff.
Yeah, no, I think, Kevin, that's, I think that was where we all sort of started. And then, what I've sort of realized in the journey is that nobody wants just a basic box, right? Like everybody wants something that still looks great, functions great. And you don't actually have to have a basic box. In fact, there's infinite number of solutions that work, but they still need to be essentially simple, right? Not necessarily a box, but you can't go too far outside of, you can't go crazy. And anytime you do, like an H shape or a, really elongated corridors, you're losing multiple functionality by elongated design anyway, because what do you need for, if you got to get to a room all the way at the end, you need a corridor, right? Corridor is a total waste of space. It's like total dumb square footage that you just basically are throwing away because it's not, it's just it's like a road inside your house. And, that's real estate that's just totally wasted. So, compact shapes have really awesome functionality, but, what I'm seeing with my designs is, having done this for 12, 15 years now, it's, keep realizing it's been longer. There's lots of fabulous design solutions, and there's opportunities within the constraints of like simple. And, exploring that has been kind of the fun part of what I've been able to do. And I've, figuring out like, constraints are really awesome because you get to be creative within those constraints.
Yeah, it's no fun if you can't stretch your imagination or your creativity and just pumping out the same thing. That would get boring really quick.
Yeah, it's not a challenge, right?
Right. But so I keep harking back to the production, but I'm trying to figure out ways to kind of make a bigger dent. And I couldn't on the one-offs, but I'm in front of more builders now that I can bend their ear a little bit, but I have to bend it carefully and not push or not pull, but hear them, what they're going through. Right now, I'm currently residing in Alabama, and there's a lot of housing stock that just is idle. Either they're, material shortages, labor shortages, whatever, and they're all kind of suffering because of it. But it's just a shame if they would have adapted a different business model or different production model, 5 years ago, they probably wouldn't be in this crunch. They'd be selling them left and right, producing their houses in a building somewhere else under their nice, comfy factory, and erect them in a week or two and be done with it. But they just are so concerned about what they can sell today and next month. They're very short-sighted. Not to bash them, but that's just their reality.
No, and honestly, they've been pushed into that because that's how a whole system is structured, right? So, I think what I would recommend is find somebody who is either pressed enough, like who's really like in a tight bind, that is finally now willing to look at an alternate solution, or find somebody who is just more predisposed to do different. And they're, like once you work with the front runners and the people who are, just, there's a social, science statistical curve of, it's a bell curve of, there's the laggers, there's the mass majority of the market, and then there's the front runners. It's the front runner people that are always going to be more inclined to try new and be a little bit more adventurous. It's just the human spectrum of like people, some are just much more open to that. Those are the people you want to find and work with them. And then they will, like once they've figured it out, everybody else will look at them and go, what are they doing? And why is what they're doing working? And so that's kind of what I've, figured out. And you can apply, and you apply it to everything. I mean, I realize that's, I'm kind of naturally predisposed to do, never really interested in being, conventional and running with the herd. It's just not interesting to me.
So you're more careful about picking your battles these days and your partnerships and
So the same with policy. Figure out who's, find the people that are actually open to doing different and work with them, support them, show them, what's possible. And, now I've just, we've identified all these policies that are actually really working. We've analyzed what's the functional ingredients of those policies, because these specific mechanisms that are common to all these programs that are actually really accelerating. And I was like, wow, once you get the pattern, it's like a recipe. You can just, rinse and repeat, right?
Right.
So,
that's great advice. I mean, and that's kind of what I do, but I hope others do that too, because it just spreads. And that's kind of what we've been doing for the last 15 years, right? Just kind of spreading the word. And it's fun and exciting. And we have a few minutes, but I just wanted to make sure that if there's anything that you want to share or talk about, that we get to it. So, what can we do for you? Where do you need support?
Well, what's so interesting is we're scaling this policy, these policy patterns, and we'll be issuing our report in June, the sort of the final version. We're always interested in working with people who want to do not just better, but much better. It's the wheelhouse that we've decided that's our value add. The passive house community is, we've always done that. That's kind of where we're can add value. And I think, interesting new territory that we're opening up. We just released our pH ribbon tool, which is embodied carbon calculator.
Nice.
Specifically for Passive House, it's an integrated plugin for the PHPP energy model.
So the goal is to show you the emissions
Your embodied
based on a design
carbon for the materials that you select for your project.
Can you, I know we only have a minute or two. Can you educate me? What are they all going to be using the same criteria? If I buy a 2x4 in California, does it have the same, right? So does it shift, or how do you track it?
So it's using the database that was developed by EC3. So it's US specific database. We had the tool adapted specifically for the US market. It's all in IP units as well. And it's using the EPA's carbon emissions for your specific grid. So you plug in where your project is. It uses the emissions, the transit, and the utility emissions for your specific grid region. And then the materials are calculated based on where they're sourced from, and we still need the EPD for them. So it's using the database that EC3 Building Transparency has developed. So it's using a localized database, and all of that specific material, where you're purchasing it from, who's manufacturing it, gets calculated in. So it's still early days. There's lots more that, there's big gaps in that database, but we saw that database as being sort of the most robust one we could use. But the real magic of this tool is that we're looking at operational energy with embodied carbon energy in the same model.
Yeah, that's what I've always hoped for, is that connection, because it's like two sides of the table, but you got to look at the whole table.
Exactly. And that's the deal, why when I saw that, I said, oh, that's what we really need. And I kind of connected with the developer and had him adapt this for our US market. So it's a Passive House network product that we've helped make sure we brought it to market here. And again, it's that connecting the two sides of that table, because most models either do only operational or only embodied carbon. And when you don't look at them together, you actually come up with different,
yeah, you might have the same thing built over here, but move 100 miles and it might change everything, or some of it, or very cool, very interesting.
Yeah. And what it's really blowing my mind on is that efficiency, making your building more efficient, really matters, because when you add PV into the model, it blows the numbers out of the water. And I
was just going to say, it must kill you on the embodied side.
Yeah, I was shocked at how heavy of a embodied carbon footprint PV has. And not to say that PV is bad. I think PV is great, but
right. It's kind of hard to say that in the same breath, right? It's kind of, you've seen the data now, you've seen the connection, the analytic, and no one really hears that on the other side of the fence. They're just saying, oh, look at all that nice PV on that whole community.
It's got some serious impact, and we need to make that visible, because it changes the choices that we make with our buildings.
Knowing that now that we didn't know 10 years ago, would you have a different list of advice to give to the CPUC? As far, or, their directives, all the solar that they wanted to slap on, if they would have known that, what we just talked about, I don't think they would have gone down that road.
There was a huge push. I know, anybody who's been in the efficiency kind of world for a long time, there was a huge push because everybody said, well, PV is cheaper than more efficiency. It's cheaper to add more PV than it is to add more efficiency because we weren't looking at the embodied carbon footprint.
Right. That was just a closed door that everybody ignored walking down that hallway. It was always there, but no one looked at it. Yeah.
Well, I think we just didn't know and it wasn't visible. Now we know. And I think, I have to say I didn't know either. So, it would be a sort of, easy to say, oh, should have, woulda, shoulda, coulda. But now we know. And, the CEC is now trying to add battery storage into the code and I'm like, no.
But yeah, there again, you're just throwing another widget into the mix that's going to have problems for the next generation when they have to go pile them up in a warehouse somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, they only just are starting to require blower door testing now, 10 years later. And that has massive impact on energy use that's never been credited. The model wasn't really calibrated to actually register the benefits of what that can do. And so the basic stuff still, nobody looks at thermal bridges. I was at a KBEC conference, those are the folks who do all the energy models for all the code compliance. Only one person in the room had done a thermal bridge calculation.
or understands the definition. Yeah, I get it. I know. It's
These
crazy.
are the low-hanging fruit things that still haven't been even, looked at and considered. Air sealing, thermal bridges, no-brainer, not calculated. So we've got massive opportunity. We've got lots of opportunity to learn more. And again, I'm a huge, if there's one takeaway, if there's one message I will leave you with, anybody who has any influence, if you're not supporting the front runners, you're doing it wrong.
Right. Yeah, we have to stand behind them and support them and catch them when they fall and pick them back up and push them forward because you're absolutely right.
Give them all the help you have available. Those are the people that will change your market and they will drag the reluctant people behind them. They will always be kicking and screaming, and that will never change. So, shift your focus to the people who actually want to do better.
I totally agree, and I couldn't have thought of a better sign-off. What a great way to end the conversation. Thank you so much, Bronwyn, and keep up the great work. Please keep us posted what you're doing and those efforts, and I'm going to keep preaching passive house and low emissions till I die. So I'm right there with you. If you ever need anything, you give us a buzz, okay?
Fabulous. Thanks, Kevin, and thanks for all your own work. It's great to see you also still plugging away.
I'll try to get out to California one of these days and come visit you guys. I miss everybody over there. So
awesome.
All right. Take care, Bronwyn. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.